All right, hello everybody. This is Nephew SIG Automation Meeting for September 6th. Let me share the agenda. Okay, so what we talked about last time was starting to do 2 minutes each, and there's a lot more tracks than, I don't know, I give us 15 minutes to do it. So let's try and do it quick. I wanted to start with a sort of release track overview. So Bala, that would be you. And I have some questions, so I'll let you talk first.
Yeah, thanks, John. So what I did is for the three main, I started creating epics. So the epics are there for OAI integration, ORAN integration, and in addition to the tasks that were already there. So I created the subtasks for that. So and then Timo and I were discussing about documentation things. So I created one epic for that. So again, we need to create the material subtasks for professional documentation and add to the sprints. Obviously, the one for the tech debts, there are many issues are already there. So at this point of time, I think what we need to do is what we were doing for the first release. Actually, at least weekly once or maybe twice, at least once, go through the board and assign items and things like that. I think we had created a sprint. Obviously, things were at flex in terms of requirements, etc. Now that we have committed, we know what exactly we need to do. I think probably we need to start doing that. I think the tasks are there, boards are there, and we will continue to create tasks, but we need to do that at this point of time so that we have some ownership.
So do we have did we start a sprint already? Like I think we need to do a sprint planning, like you're saying, but what is the sprint schedule? Do we have that laid out?
So I had created a first sprint. But the thing is, we were not sprinting. Probably I was thinking probably let's sprint from this week, create a first sprint from yesterday and 2 weeks from yesterday. Not yesterday,
Okay.
I mean, whatever, this Monday.
Okay.
So that we can have 2 week sprints from, like Monday to Friday. I know we lost 2 days, so it's okay. Probably that's what I was thinking. Because we had already he had already created a sprint and the sprint board, but we were not tracking. So
Exactly. We haven't really kicked it off. Yeah.
So probably I was thinking that probably let's start a sprint, create a sprint from this Monday, 2 weeks onwards, and then let's create how many of our sprints till November 15th.
Okay. Then the other.
But we need to track and we need to assign things. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that I added some time at the end. I doubt we'll have time for it, but we talked about having a second meeting. I was thinking that I think after this week, Thursday 9 a.m. is opening up from the SIG1 meetings. If that's okay with everybody, I was just going to take that slot, but I will just reach out to me on Slack if that's a problem, so we can keep this moving along.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, then thank you, Bala. So Wim.
Yeah, I am scoping. So the reason I put myself on the agenda today was because of that. So I've been working with Eric and Bernard mainly. And so the goal is to present what we believe we should accomplish and discuss architecture and building blocks and what we focus on and stuff like that. So that's what I've been doing so far. Okay. And so the goal, I hopefully will do it, but I'll also present tomorrow in the SIG1 as well, because the presentation is a bit of a mix. Right?
Okay. So the goal then would be like by the end of this week to know what the major chunks are. Is that the idea?
Yes. Yeah. There is already a proposal, but it hasn't been discussed with a wider group. So I'm hoping to get some feedback and then get that sorted. Yeah, ASAP.
Okay, awesome. Sagar, are you here? Yes.
Yeah.
So just any updates as we roll into starting our sprints?
Yeah, so for me, what I was doing is that I was just fixing the blueprint for R1, which I also need for R2. So I was fixing the operators of the code network of OEI code network. When I was running with Nephew, I saw there were some issues with dynamicity when the functions restart. They were losing connections between each other. So I just corrected that this week. So that was done. Updated our operators also. That's also okay. I also posted yesterday that I'm using configref to handle the configuration of the core network now, and that is also fine. And Stephen told me that either it's better to extend the CRD with 3GPP specific configuration, so I can do that later. So for the moment, I'll just use the NF configuration inside configref. And then today I had a session with Alex for using Scooper for SBI. So Scapper, sorry. So to use Scapper for SBI to expose the SBI services of, let's say, NRF, let's say, on all the three clusters, on edge 1, regional, and edge 2. So this way, I mean, even the UPF can communicate to NRF. That's what I actually want. So this is what, so I just have to create a package variant of Scapper as I discussed with Alex. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, so that's like a some sort of alternative service discovery type of thing.
Yes, for multi-cluster environment as we have.
But
Okay.
Sagar, if we just have DNS, is that not sufficient?
It is, but the thing is, then I have to expose the primary CNI of Kubernetes. So how I will use that IP address, let's say how will I use that in another cluster, because that is also only
So
residing in the cluster, right?
We have MetLB, right? As a load balancer.
Yes. So I mean, we can use DNS also, but then yeah.
I think
that's what I was also doing with Scooper,
yeah, we probably need to discuss this a bit further, because I've been looking a little bit into it, but not in depth. But
yeah, there's a bunch of different options for how
yes,
we do the yeah. Like okay. I mean, I think it's fine to try something, see how it works, and it's an option, right?
Just a quick question, but why does edges require NRF reachability? I thought NRF is only for purely for the functions using the SBA, right?
Yeah. So just an update on that. If I release 16 and release 17, there is a possibility that UPF can also reach NRF and register themselves. Like they can register and exchange heartbeats, and this way SMF can dynamically discover the UPFs. So this is purely for just discovering UPFs via SMF. So that's something in release 16, and then it was also extended in release 17. So that's what we have. So yeah.
So does UPF have an SBI interface?
Yes.
Yeah, I do want to say that Sagar has been very great in updating us on Slack. So it's probably good to keep an eye on Slack. He's been updating on SIG automations. That discussion actually was on Slack. He was mentioning that UPF has an SB interface, and he's trying to reach the NRF on the other.
Okay. So, I didn't see that architecture yet. So anyways, yeah, thanks.
Okay, so those are like, I mean, I think it's okay, right? We'll be showing different ways of doing things, and so one of the ways in the documentation I've started to rearrange things is we'll have opinionated installations, and the sandbox will be one opinionated installation. Alexi's got one for OpenShift he's working on. I've got one for GCP I'm working on, and we can add as many as we want, and they'll demonstrate how to do things in different infrastructure providers, as well as different network functions. So I think this is going to grow over time as a sort of body of opinionated installations, each of which is really just an example, right? That some particular end user would use to piece together what they want to do. So that, I guess, just to keep the ball rolling here, jumping into my area. So I did try to lay out the major pieces of the tech debt that I see. Some of it's more like upstream changes to the way things should be done in like Captain Porch, but some of it's tech debt. And then when we go into sprint planning, we'll try to prioritize what I think needs to be done. I think one of our critical pieces is the intercluster networking automation I want to see so that we can get to a fully automated. Eric and I talked about this before. Like what we want to be able to do is apply one resource and come back 15 minutes later and have, gone from just a management cluster to a fully working thing, right? And so maybe it'll take more than 15 minutes, but something like that, right? We should be able to do it at that scale, but in order to do that, we need all of those hacks that we run in the steps to be gone. So that's one major thing. The other is right now there's a hard dependency on Git in our controllers. I want to pull that out. When we get those two pieces done, those are kind of some of the more tech daddy pieces I think we need to address. So those will probably be things I want to do right away. So anyway, we're planning right now. Yeah, Bala.
So John, I have some of logistical questions for Sagar actually. Sagar, thanks for everything. But I know at the end of the month, you'll get very busy with your PhD program, which we are very happy about. But all the operator and everything that you're working is in the OAI repo. So if at all that needs some work, let's say everything is great, that's fine. But it's usually in software, we know there'll be bug fixes needed, all those kind of tweaks needed, etc. when you do the integration. So who has signed the CLA from our group to the OAI so that if at all that's needed, someone can contribute to it? I know you said Joseph was working on that, and probably then I was under the impression that he's not working on the OAI repo probably. So anyway, Joseph has raised his hand. I'll let him talk. So
yeah, regarding the RAN part, I think it's not there in OAI
yes,
repository. So for the RAN, I think I was thinking that we can create a report here in FEO, similar to Free5GC, which is for core, and an example for RAN for OAI can be done in FEO.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
We can contribute there for the RAN related operators, CRGs, and KRM functions. So that was a plan that we discussed with Sagar. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to update. Is that I mean, I wanted to check if
No, RAN is clear,
right.
Joseph. I'm not worried about RAN. Since my understanding was it was going to be in. Yes, my question was more for the core. If there is an issue comes when Sagar is away, how are we going to manage it? Because it is going to remain in OAI repo, and for anybody to contribute to that one, somebody should sign OAI CLA. So I was wondering, do we have anybody in our group who has signed that CLA so that in Sagar's absence, if something is needed, we could do it?
I believe Joseph has. Is that correct, Joseph?
No, Joseph, that's the thing.
I can only contribute to nephew.
Okay. I'm sorry, I missed that.
So
okay,
I think
I can always go sign the CLA. Like that's not unless Google's pretty flexible about those things. I don't have to go any. I'll go read it if it's assuming it's not onerous. Generally, contributing to existing open source projects is a non-issue for us, and I can sign it individually typically. From a Google point of view, but I'll have to double check, but I expect that won't be a problem.
Yeah, hopefully it's not GPL v3.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, well, that would be just we can't include it in anything. But
yeah, that's true. We'll drop it off of license check anyway when that happens.
Yeah.
Anyways, I can forward it to you. I can forward it to you, and you can have a look. And if you have any questions, I can also get you in touch with people. But it's
yeah. If you can maybe just post it on Slack.
I mean, I can take a look as well. So because obviously
I'll just do that.
Yeah.
Cool. Sagar, sorry. One more question for you. I know you'll be gone in October. When are you going to be back, Sagar?
So see, I mean, it's not gonna be that I will be completely off the grid. Of course, I'm gonna check my messages because I cannot live without it. So, but my defense is on the 16th of October, 22nd, and then 22nd and then after 16th of October, I'll be more or less available. Let's say, but to be completely available to attend all the meetings, I can start after 25th of October.
Okay.
And then more or less I'll be available if there are some changes which are supposed to be done, or if there anything which is supposed to be done, I can do it more or less.
Okay, got it. So, okay.
Yeah, but if somebody just signs if somebody is able to sign it and have a look at my code, so I think it will be good, so that there is somebody else also.
Right.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I just wanted to make sure
We're-
yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, please.
No, I'm just saying we're actually over time on what we wanted to spend on this first item, so I just want to try and
Okay,
move us along.
cool. Yes, that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
Nephew SDK, Stephen.
Yeah, 1 minute. So we have this document, and then for all the areas, everyone has signed up. So thank you. And then we just we have update meetings every Tuesday. So Sandeep's nice enough to let us hijack his W Group 4 meetings to do SDK stuff. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Can you put the document, the link you just pasted into the agenda so that it's not lost after we?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tal. So this is a little weird. This track has Tal as the lead, but then there's two things under it with Subhash and Fikra. So I don't know how we want to handle reporting this status, but.
Yeah, I think I was not prepared for this. I didn't know that I was quite selected as lead, but no problem. It's
document the SIG 1 agenda. That's all I know.
Yeah, actually, so I'm actually not entirely sure if there was a work group 4 meeting yesterday. It was not on my calendar. Something I guess happened. It was on my calendar before. So if there was, I missed it. It seems like there was because there was a post on Slack. So I might be out of date over what happened yesterday. Does anybody know?
Yesterday there was no working group 4. There was an SDK meeting.
Oh, okay, that was the Slack. Okay, okay, I see. So,
well, maybe Subhash and Fikra can each just talk about. This is for POX in general, so it's a weird track, right? So I don't know how you want to organize it.
Right. So I thought of POX being kind of the use cases that are in. So look, we've talked about policy, but we don't really have any use case yet for it. We're working maybe on the service assurance use case. So there are a few interesting proposals starting to talk about that. That might end up being the use case for which policy is applied, because policy in itself, well, policy affects so many different things. It's really hard to know where to implement it. Like we don't have a plan of an implementation of policy right now in SIG 2, right? Okay. We need an actual use case to work with and see where in the whole stack we would apply policy. So it might be a service assurance kind of minimal viable use case for service assurance. So we don't have that quite yet. With Helm, I know that a few people are looking at operator SDK in terms of Helm support. So I'm not sure I would put Helm under POCs. I think maybe Helm goes into the kind of operator SDK and onboarding track.
That's fine with me. This is the organization that was like talked about in SIG 1. That's why I put it here. I think Subhash has a hand up.
Sure. Go ahead, Subhash.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you, John, for arranging meeting the policy for the update. So actually, last SIG 1 meeting we discussed around the service assurance, how we can hook policy there. And I'm also seeing there could be a possible charter around security. So that one use case could come from there. So that could target it. We could start the service assurance to provide some kind of to provide some kind of a KRM generation, so that we try to prove it. And also port security. So around this we will look and try to formulate some kind of use case and proceed further. So these are the updates from the policy side.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, for the Helm thing, Fiatra is nice enough to say integrate that into SDK task. So we've been tracking it anyway. So thanks.
Sorry, I'll raise my hand. Yeah, no real update on Helm, but as Stephen said, we've bundled everything into the working group 4 meeting, which is nice of Sandeep.
Okay.
So hopefully we can kind of discuss and yeah, I added an item to the agenda. Hopefully not to hijack this meeting, but maybe just to get some guidance on the direction of the POC for the operator SDK, because we're hitting. I think we've been a little bit over ambitious, and may need to change track. So, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So maybe for future meetings, we should figure out. I guess I'll ask Tal. Since you're nominated as the lead here, can you figure out how you want to report on this? If these get bundled into the other tracks, that's fine. It gives us more time. But yeah, sort that out.
Yeah. I'm sorry for this confusion. We're working it out, I guess. I would say that I wouldn't put Helm under the. So you're calling it POC. I would call my track the integration track, rather, or this north, south, east, west integration track. That there are currently a bunch of POCs, but some POCs are not under that, right? I think the Helm POC is more on the onboarding track, which is what we call the Nephew SDK.
That's fine. Just if after a meeting you can go ahead and do it. I just want to be sure we give enough time for the next items, because there's a couple of fairly beefy items I think here.
Okay, just to be, because we're doing this now. Does that organization make sense to people? That my track would be called North, South, East, West integrations, and Steven's track would be called vendor onboarding?
I think we have to align it. We should align it with R1, right? Otherwise, we lose track somehow. I think. That's my only. Yeah. Yes, because otherwise we'll it has to fit there, right? Somehow.
Yeah, that was where I got it from.
Well, POC is just such a weird track. I mean,
I agree.
They're just very diverse POCs.
It just came straight out of this, right? So it's fine. I don't like. It just came straight out of this. So let's.
Yeah, the SDK is aimed for vendor onboarding, so that's that. I'm okay with that too. I mean, the track name doesn't bother me that much, so I'm okay with that.
All right. Okay, so then I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna turn it over to Wim. Sebastian, your hand is still up. I think that's stale.
Yeah, John. I had one general query. So recently, I saw there was one discussion around the OAI compatibility spec, right? So are we looking around it? Because there are a lot of discussion happened on it on this topic. OAI compatibility spec. Someone was discussing.
Sagar is OAI. Sagar is building out OAI on top of.
I think it is OCI.
Sorry. My mistake. My bad. OCI spec. OCI compatibility spec. OCI.
It's.
Oh, you're talking about for the idea of putting requirements into the OCI container image.
Yeah,
I think somehow this is covered in what I'm going to present. Whether we do it in that way or not is an open discussion. But what I'm going to present is covering not the exact way of doing it, but the scope is covering that.
Okay. Okay, sure.
All right. Thank you. So let me figure out how to stop sharing.
I think
one question, John. I mean, I had posted it on the chat. So, I mean, do we have similar kind of sign up and contributors kind of list for other items too? And I'm assuming that there's similar parallel tracks that we had for R1, right? Or is there one view where we have all that?
We're not doing those sub projects that we had before. These are the tracks, but of course, there's also just any issue you can pick up and work on. There's bugs, there's lots of things. So, and I think we didn't have like documentation on this track, which I know, is important. So like, if there's another area you think is important and you want to like contribute to, yeah, just raise it here or on Slack and we'll, this is the high level, what SIG 1 and SIG 2 kind of came up with together of areas we want to track or themes over the just R2, which is just now a few sprints. But that doesn't mean it's the entirety of all the work that's going to be done.
No. I'm just talking about the items that you listed, because I think what the link Stephen had was primarily for the NFU SDK, and it had multiple sub items.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So Ravi wanted a document similar that people can sign up on different tracks.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then the schedule for meetings and all that. So.
Yeah. So on the tech debt one, we're just going to use the project board, and that's the sprint planning Bala was talking about. We're going to sit down together and go through those issues and ask for people. And I've got it on this agenda, but like I said, we probably won't have time for it. To go through the board and say, hey, who wants to contribute to this? And then I think right now the stage that the NF to infra thing is, that'll be the next stage of it. But right now, I think Wim wants to present and kind of give, here's the approach that's going to be taken. And if we all agree on that, then it will break down into tasks in that way.
Yes.
Yeah, Ravi, eventually, I would like everything to be in as a GitHub issue, whether it's a POC or this thing, so that everything is visible to everyone there, and then we can pull them into sprints, and then we can work on that.
Sure. No, I was looking at this kind of the breakout meetings that probably would be kind of the way we did. So I was thinking I didn't want to miss those meetings. So
last meeting we said we're not going to do breakouts. We're just going to do 2 full SIG meetings a week.
Got it. Okay, that's looking.
Yeah.
I missed probably coming on vacation
John,
and stuff. Thanks.
John, we can do breakouts, but we have to report in this meeting the architectural thing, right? I think that's what, because even for SDK, there is breakout meetings. So
we've been having breakout sessions for observability too. So by just have them and make them public.
They're ad hoc breakouts, or the breakouts.
They're ad hoc. Make them public. Make them aware on Slack, and then hopefully folks will be joining.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
And can I start?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, because this is a very, very big topic. First of all, this was a presentation put together between Bernard, Eric, and myself, right? So, so this is actually a presentation. And by the way, Bernard and Eric, please chime in wherever you want. It's actually a presentation that basically covers both, I think, SIG 1 and SIG 2 to a certain extent. So the idea is basically to put a little bit more the bigger picture together and then try to scope maybe certain pieces for R2, but this is going to potentially be a multi-release journey. So what are we talking about is the goals or the objectives, it should be as a typo, is that today our customers, they are struggle to basically onboard network functions. And there is a set of requirements that are either mostly implicit, and they are figured out very late into the cycle, even when they deploy, right? And so what people would like to have is a number of things to make this smoother and easier. Right? So one of them is that we have a clear set of requirements that are coming from the vendors, if you will, that are expressed, in our case, through KRM. And then the idea is that we then validate, actuate that. So there's a bunch of things that we have to do to accomplish that. The ultimate goal is that this becomes a completely automatic and dynamic environment. So for example, to give you an idea, today, we install Multus by default. With this approach, this would be a result of a network function asking for Multus. Right, so just to give you a sense of what we are talking about. So there's a bunch of things that we install by default onto the clusters. The idea going forward, if we go with this approach, is that this becomes more of a, let's say, complete automation framework that does that automatically based on what the requirements are asking us. So when we talk about requirements, so they are typically mainly focused between network function and infra. So there is interface and network, which we did some of them. There is host requirements like kernel modules we talk about, OS configuration, Kubernetes packages, like sometimes certain storages, CNIs, and certain software packages that certain vendors rely upon, right? So that is one thing, is that we want to express these requirements in a, let's say, unified way. Second is we want to have then a mechanism that can validate whether or not this is already in place or not, right? We want to have the ability to influence and actuate. So if the requirements are not fulfilled, we want to be able to influence that if that's allowed. And the idea is that this is not a single network function to a single infra. It will be a multiple network functions. So this could be that there are conflicting requirements, so we have to deal with that. Plus, we have to find, so we don't want any root access from the requirement setting. So basically, this should ideally be handled all through a KRM-based system, right? And so this is an explicit comment from Bernard, is that, this is a huge task. So the idea is that we want to, besides probably doing a reference implementation, the whole process and stuff like that is also a very important building block. By the way, Eric and Bernard, please chime in if you, or anyone, just ask question per slide, probably it's easier.
Yeah, but that's great what you're saying. Thank you.
I wanted to make one comment that I think a useful thing is that some requirements may be able to be, you talk about implicit versus explicit. And what would be, I think, useful, if I were writing packages, if I were a function vendor, network function vendor writing packages, I would find it useful to have a tool at the least that I can run over my package and it can identify based upon, like, if I have a NAD in there, or I have something, like, it will automatically say, oh, this implicitly, or it would take those implicit requirements and make them explicit, perhaps, and say, hey, now I require Multis, or I require something like it. So anyway, that might be something to put on the goals too. And I had thought about this as built into the Nefio infrastructure. This is kind of gets back to that dependency controller. It's like, I see a CR in your package and the CRD is not on the cluster. You need to do something about that. It's not an infrastructure requirement, but it's a pattern wise, it's the same thing. I'd love to have that be discoverable, I guess is my point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's in scope, if you will. The question is, how do we go about it, right? Is it,
Okay.
Okay. So, Fish.
Yeah. So I see that you have got the host requirements and talk about kernel modules and host configuration. That's cool. We also thought about some BIOS configurations. This was my first ever question when I came to the Nefio Developer Summit.
So this list is by far complete, right? But BIOS could be of a concern potentially. So
like NUMA nodes and all, because when I think about telco, it's all about bare metal. Finally, that's when you get there. The other thing is, this is my assumption. I could be wrong here, right? So any network function vendor that actually, I'm expecting that they'll publish what their network function deployment requirements are when it comes to things on, things like this OS configurations and this BIOS configurations. Are we taking that into account? I mean, is that assumption a good one? Because they are the ones that need to specify to us, hey, if you want to be actually, they will publish some sort of a reference architecture documentation or something, which will tell you, you need this many CPUs, these are your BIOS settings, these are the kernel modules you need installed. Is that a good assumption to have? Are we working under that assumption?
So the goal, which is to, so today there is a lot of implicit things that are being said or done either in a document and stuff like that. What you see in reality is that those things are either forgotten, not very well expressed, or not expressed. I don't know all the reasons. There's different teams involved. The whole idea here is to make this completely automatable, right? So in other words, we want to go to a way more formal approach to this. And then there's two ways, I think maybe two, let's say high-level ways to do so, is that we have a clear mechanism on describing those requirements, and that's it, right? Versus what John was saying is we kind of imply it from the artifacts that are being deployed. So so where you basically go through their existing Helm charts or whatever, or packages, and we implicitly figure it out. But one way or another, what we want to tackle is a way more formal approach to this dependencies.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe just to illustrate, because so we are working with many vendors in Orange. So I can tell you we have different situation, because today we are deploying also some network function in the infrastructure provided by the vendor. For example, Nokia, we are deploying some network function from Nokia on their network infrastructure. So as a result, maybe Nokia team, they didn't need to express some specific requirement to the infra team, because the infra team from Nokia knows perfectly what should be deployed. But when we want to deploy this network function in another, let's say, cluster not provided by Nokia in such case, sometimes, let's say, some requirements are not described, because by nature people believe it's implicit. And also, in addition, what we can see, it's the main, let's say, requirements are written in some documents. It's not, let's say, consistent between the various description and so on. So you need to read, let's say, various requirements. And like I tell you, for some deployment we did, it's sometimes a headache, because you need to read some documents, you deploy your cluster with a requirement expressed, and then you deploy the network function, and you discover, this class is storage class is missing, so it doesn't work, and so on. So that's why I think I strongly believe we need to try to formalize this requirement. I think today we have the tools for that. We have, I think, all this capability to do it. So that's why we need to do it. And just to finish, why I try to express also, it's we have various level of requirements at the host level. I'd say what I call the Kubernetes level, where we, for example, all this mechanism of CNI and so on. And on top of it, we need, for some network function, to add some pure software package. So that's why maybe this is a complex problem. I'm not sure we can address all of that. But if we can, let's say, have in mind this stretch goal and try to go step by step to try, let's say, to solve some problems for R2 and after for R3 and so on.
Yeah. So because at least from reading through a couple of years, some of these things I can feel is like, it can fall into this end-to-end orchestration and NFVO, if you're familiar with Mano, which will be able to do this. At least we should be able to have some sort of a query for some of these orchestrations, to be able to query a cluster to see if that has got the capability where you can deploy this. At least those kind of things need to be done. Okay.
Yeah, Subhash, sorry.
Yeah.
We have to see in time somehow a little bit. Go ahead.
So when I read the first line, the NF expresses its requirement in a declarative way, or any compatibility spec, because NF vendor knows its NF better, right? So I see like actually they are putting the policy, because using the policy, we can convey to infrastructure what exactly the NF needs, right? So when I was going through,
everything is a policy at the end of the day, Subhash. Everything is a policy from my point of view, right?
But yeah, what I'm trying to say that already we are trying to build some framework where you can declaratively express your constraint, right? So why not to take it advantage, or maybe just evolve it there and express in some declarative way. Already I was speaking with OCI folks who are trying to do this spec compatibility spec. I was trying to speak with them. So the requirement was something like, the spec is there, and let's try to convert into policy and apply into the infrastructure, so that automatically to deliver this requirement. So that was also my thought process. Why not to realize it using the policy and call it a policy scope there?
Yeah, we are discussing implementation. For me, that's not the goal yet. Secondly, OCI is at the last layer. We are typically having dependencies that are interrelated. So OCI is at the very bottom. What we are talking about is the interdependencies between multiple layers. So I think we are at a higher level than OCI is trying to address right now. So that was also been my comment to the people. But yeah.
Actually, the demo what I shared long before, right? That was the fifth point. Miss, I was trying to give an idea that, let's say if NF vendor says that I don't want to run as a root, so that can be validated at the time of package preparation itself. So that root access denial, right? So that I tried to demonstrate.
But root is basically what we want to prevent from happening. But what we want to basically accomplish is that certain dependencies that they have, that they get fulfilled or either explicitly mentioned of why this cannot be deployed for whatever reason, right? And at the end of the day, we have to build in a policy system to do so. But we want to be explicit about the use case that we want to address first.
I think.
Okay, let's move on because we are otherwise we are never going to get through.
Can I just add another comment? So I'm agreeing with both of you. Yes, this is about policies, as Wim's saying, let's not dive into implementation yet. But I just want to point out to Subhash, Kubernetes itself is a policy engine, right? In a very limited way. But think like every resource in Kubernetes, like a deployment resource, is a policy for how you deploy pods and their images, right? And it applies that policy, but making sure that the pods are up with the replica set, et cetera. So it's a very limited policy engine to an extent, very extensible, of course, in other ways. The limitation is that usually Kubernetes policies they're not topological, right? There's no graph really in that. And other policy engines like Open Policy Agent have, maybe more flexible rules that you can set up, right? But let's not forget that Kubernetes is a way to implement policies, and it should be considered as one of the possible implementations, right? And we can call them policies, right? You see, I've definitely seen Kubernetes resources that are called, the kind name is policy. I know Red Hat uses this a lot in their ACM deployment system where it's all policies, but all the policies are implemented as Kubernetes resources. So anyway, that's my point. We can move on.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on, Subhash. Otherwise, we were not going to get out of thing because we are talking implementation. We should not do that yet. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Bernard, do you want to run through this, or?
I can quickly explain the basic idea. And again, it's only sort of a proposal which definitely needs to be refined. The idea is that sort of from a user journey perspective, as a service provider, we would like to have following process in place. We would have a management cluster and we would have the infrastructure provider basically sort of uploading or onboarding all the infrastructure definitions and especially including information regarding what kind of capabilities this infrastructure is able to expose. Yeah, basically this means that the infrastructure would not be some kind of sort of standardized infrastructure, but something where we would say there are certain configuration options which might allow us to tweak the infrastructure towards the requirements of the network functions. In the second step, we would also have network function vendors sort of upload all their software artifacts, and in this context also sort of in a machine readable way describe what kind of network function specific requirements there might be towards the infrastructure. Then sort of there would be this integration process, this design process where sort of a service provider would say, I would like to now deploy this network function onto sort of that type of runtime environment, basically representing some kind of cluster where we have the description of the existing capabilities. And by bringing back together those two elements, the network function, which we would like to deploy, and the infrastructure cluster, which we would like to make use of, there would be then the foundation for triggering a process which would validate if the infrastructure is actually capable of supporting the requirements issued by the network function vendor. And as a result, either we get sort of, no, this is not possible, there are certain things missing, or ideally there would even be sort of a, let's say, KPT package, which would allow us then to, based on that, trigger the deployment and say, okay, sort of we've understood sort of this, the intent is to put this network function onto that cluster. You would have to sort of add this sort of processing steps, and then we could make use of this result in order to actually deploy the network function onto that environment. And this deployment would have, let's say, several stages. The first stage where we prepare the cluster to account for all those requirements from the network function, and then the actual network function onboarding. And it would be nice to have in step 6 possibility to sort of track the progress of this deployment procedure. A high-level perspective, and again, sort of up for debate of how we can optimize that, but it just gives you an impression of what we as a service provider would love to see, because currently we actually do a lot of deployment debugging until we get it right. And this would be a more sort of systematic way of trying to early detect if there are incompatibilities and we need to address them.
And Bernard, based on the previous slide, it sounds like as well, your structure here is about one NF, but if we had a collection of NFs, and we may want to look at them together, figure out how to prepare the infrastructure once, make sure that there aren't conflicting requirements, etc. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So, I mean, I've tried to basically segment where all this work potentially involves in. So, of course, today we schedule a package from a network function. So first of all, I think we have to define how we get requirements. So I skipped this step because I thought the previous slides are somehow reflecting that a little bit. So one is, how do we get visibility of those requirements? I think there is basically 2 approaches. One is a formal process where we basically create a set of KRM resources that are explicit about them, right? So that basically within a package, I say, I need multis, although I think it's a bad requirement, if I'm honest. It should be, I need multi-networking, or I need multiple networks on my thing. So that's another debate, is how low level does that requirement come or get to. So that's one is a formal approach. The other one is that we basically discover it based on heuristics or something like that of a package. But okay, on one hand, we have a set of requirements. Then I think, and my proposal is that we are not tackling this in the R2 scope, but what you could then do is, like the Kubernetes scheduler, he has a way based on requirements that comes from a pod, where does it get scheduled, right? And he has a logic that basically deals with that. So that is one domain where this potentially fits. My proposal is to not tackle this in R2, right? But this is something that probably we might have to deal with going forward, right?
Yeah, so I would suggest, so PVS is intentionally very simple. I would suggest it's an alternate controller that would understand how to do this and use PV under the hood, or even PVS, right? It could say, oh, these RAN ones are all identical and I want to schedule 1,000 of them, but like, let's just make the primitives, let's not try and extend that primitive to do more than it already does.
Yeah, correct. So that's what I call the scheduler block. The next thing is what I think is the dependency controller, right? So this is basically where you know which clusters you are going, and okay, here again you can decide. So there is potentially a relationship with the scheduler, but this thing, and maybe this is multiple things, right? Is going to then on one hand validate whether or not this is implemented, and this goes to the full set of requirements. And again, this could be split into multiple pieces. So, but here we have a way to understand what is the actual status, right? We have a way to basically influence the status and then act upon it, right? So this is where we have to. So that's what a dependency controller is. Given that we have a broad set of use cases, whether this is a single thing or split into pieces and stuff like that, I have no idea yet. So we have to figure that out, I think, along the way. Yeah.
Conceptually, I think we need to be sure we separate sort of the Kubernetes control plane from the data plane in the sense of like you could have multiple node pools, we call them in GKE, where you have a node pool that has certain kernel and a different node pool with a different kernel. Like, but the control plane, the CRDs have to be installed in the control plane. Yeah.
Yes, and I cover that. So that's one element. Then the second element is that I think this is where I think there's also an enhancement required. Today, we just deploy a cluster from a package, but we don't really have an overarching thing in Nefio at the moment that basically tells us what the cluster is and what is the status and stuff like that, right? So I am of the opinion that we should introduce like a workload cluster we have, but it's actually the source of where everything starts and also get reported to. Whether we have kind or OpenShift or GKE implementations under the hood should be abstracted away, right? But here I also say, John is like node pools. So my idea is also to have a concept of a node pool and a node type of thing to be able, because sometimes you could, as you said, fulfill certain requirements on a dedicated node pool with a dedicated set of elements that fulfill those type of things. So, but I think one of the things that I see, which in R1 is basically we create clusters, but it's basically a package and it's by default cluster API. I have the feeling that it would be better to have, let's say, a workload cluster, and that can still be a package. That's then the implementation that then basically schedules a specific implementation and also has then a mechanism in Nefio where we report the status towards, right? So that can help us to not have to do a gazillion implementations and stuff like that. So that's then. So maybe maybe let me quickly finish this. So the goal in R2 is to start making progress, I think. I think on one hand, we have to focus on the requirements side. So basically getting information about that. And then the second thing is to say, okay, one is validation. I think that's a no-brainer, right? But in order to do validation, you need potentially some reporting, right? So they might go together or not. And then there is actuation. So also given the scope is huge, the suggestion would be to say, okay, let's focus on, let's say, two elements. One is a software package and one is a kernel module, is to say, okay, let's focus on those two use cases because we already have them in R1, right, somehow. And the idea is to basically extend the mechanism to be able to accommodate that. So that's basically what we are proposing. Of course, here it's to get feedback. And then secondly, we have to, the idea is to scope it further into building blocks and components that we could potentially work on. But definitely the requirement side is definitely one. And then the proposal is to take this multis and kernel module, so like a software package and a kernel module or something like that as an example. Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
So I just mentioned in the note, I've worked on this at some length. I do have a demonstration. It's internal to Google. I'm going to see if maybe during the workshop I can show it, possibly even share the code. We'll have to work it out internally. But this is really great. I really think we should do this ASAP. So I've done some work. I'm hoping to share it soon.
Yeah, and if you have certain ideas on the components and how we should split it, because I think there is I think there is two facets to this work, right? One is getting the requirements and discuss how we whether it's a formal way that we are getting them, right? Because right now we did a little bit in R1. Do we continue on that path, right?
I think the path is good.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think our path is good, actually. I participated in defining that path originally, right? I think the idea of having requirements in the individual packages is exactly right. The vendors know what is needed for that. The issue is that we're not deploying, the telco deployment is not just one network function. There might be a bunch of network functions on one site. Each one has its own requirements, but those requirements are cluster-wide and infra-wide, right? You need to reconcile them in some way. Maybe two different components need SRIOV, and you need to kind of figure out between them. Maybe two components are sharing a smart NIC, and you need to have a way to provide their specific needs. Sometimes the requirements are in conflict. Like deploying a UPF and an SF to a site, they have two different requirements, maybe for different models in the Linux kernel that can't be run together, right? So actually, what you might need to do is actually configure two different nodes, one for the UPF and one for the SMF, which each node has, say, different SRIOV. It could be very, very complicated to reconcile these requirements and do the work. But it's all pretty straightforward business logic, right? It's a bunch of if-else statements and then scheduling and setting affinities on the right node. Kubernetes will do the right thing. We just need a way to plug in all that business logic, right, into Nefio and find the right place for that code, right? So, yeah, I have ideas on how to do this, and I hope to show something soon.
Okay.
So we're pretty much out of time. Sorry, Fikra, we did not get to the operator SDK path. Is that something?
No problem.
So I guess this looks great to me. I think we should probably pick it up on Slack if people. It sounds like you're going to present this tomorrow to.
Because it's both SIG 1 and SIG 2 right now, because we said that we would share it. So
Okay, then I guess my question would be, do we want to try and squeeze in a second meeting to talk about sprint planning, or just start next week? Because
what I would like to, maybe just to finish on
there
this.
will be SIG 1 meeting. That's why I think that slot is not open tomorrow, because I think Kaushik said since they couldn't have meeting on Monday, I would like to have that.
Tomorrow is taken. What I would like to do as well is to schedule a meeting on this topic with people who are interested, because I think if we don't focus on it, we will not accomplish anything. So my goal was to schedule a meeting somewhere where we basically flush it out to the next level. And my plan was I'll pick a slot somewhere. But
reach out on Slack and try and organize it. Okay, awesome. This is great. I feel like we're making progress. I am a little concerned that we're not in execution mode yet on much, but
same here, John. We should get to that mode.
Yes.
Yeah, I think board will be ready. Board, there are some items probably we should start picking it up as soon as we meet next.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so especially the spillover backlog items. I would imagine some of us are already working on it. Like I'm working on an NF topology thing.
Yes.
I can imagine it'll have some impacts as well on the SDK. You'd have to have some SDK support there too for this. Even so.
Potentially,
like the tooling for discovering implicit requirements could go in the SDK potentially.
Yeah, are you in checking that the NF specify the info requirements correctly, and that type of support. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.